Hello everyone, my name is Cole, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Dogmatika Engine. Specifically, we're going to talk about what it can do, different ways to build it, and how you can use it. Right off the bat, I want to talk about some of the things it can do. It's got a quick effect, non-targeting monster negate, a targeting monster destruction by sending a monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, as well as a other handful of sending cards from the extra deck to the graveyard, both your cards and your opponent's cards as well. The base of the engine is these 9 cards: 3 copies of Nadir Servant, 3 copies of Dogmatika Ecclesia the Virtuous, 1 copy of Dogmatika Maximus, 1 copy of Dogmatika Fleur-de-Lis the Knighted, and 1 copy of Dogmatika Punishment. And 1 monster in your extra deck specifically would be Titaniclad the Ash Dragon. This definitely goes with the package. You don't necessarily want to run without it. And then the rest of these extra deck cards are sort of by, if you want to use them, you can. They all get extra effects, and we're gonna go over every single one of them in detail. So quickly running through every single card. Nadir Servant searches a Dogmatika monster by sending a monster from the extra deck to the graveyard. Dogmatika Ecclesia searches a Dogmatika card from your deck. Maximus special summons itself by banishing an extra deck monster from your graveyard, and then can send 2 extra deck monsters both from your extra deck and your opponent's extra deck. Fleur-de-Lis, like I said, is the quick effect non-targeting monster negate, and Dogmatika Punishment is a targeting monster destruction. One thing to note about Dogmatika Punishment is that you are locked out of the extra deck for that current turn and the next turn following. So, this is really a not an extra deck kind of a deck or engine. You don't really want to play this in too many decks that make a lot of use of their extra deck. However, there are ways around it, and we will talk about that. Moving into the extra deck, we've got a smorgasbord of different cards that all get effects when they're sent to the graveyard. So let's start with Titaniclad. Titaniclad can add a Dogmatika monster from your deck to your hand, or special summon a Dogmatika monster, as well as a Fallen of Albaz. So if you want to go that route, you sure can. Garura simply can draw you a card if it's sent, and Elder Entity Entes can target a monster on your opponent's side of the field and destroy it if it's sent. Mariologic Aggregator, when it's sent, can target a monster and negate its effects for the turn. Golden Cloud Beast Malong can target any card your opponent controls and return it to their hand. Herald of the Arclight can add 1 ritual spell or 1 ritual monster from your deck to your hand. Tri-Brigade Arms Blucephalus II can send an additional extra deck monster to the graveyard, barring that it is a Beast, Wing Beast, or Beast Warrior monster. And Tri-Brigade Farigite the Barren Blossom can draw you 1 more card, and then you have to put 1 card from your hand to the bottom of your deck. So as of right now, this engine is pretty dang big, so we're going to talk about ways that you can cut it later on, so that you don't have to play a full 10 cards minimum. You can play something closer to 4, 5, maybe even 6 cards maximum. But before we do that, let's quickly show off the combo so you can get an understanding of how these cards interact and how they work, and why later on we can cut certain things here and there. I will say though that you can pretty much cut any of these extra deck monsters depending on which ones you want, but I would recommend keeping the Titaniclad because it does stay with the engine as a whole. We'll start by doing a combo where we just have Nadir Servant in our hand. One thing to note about Nadir Servant, and this is very crucial, is that once you play and resolve Nadir Servant, you can no longer special summon from the extra deck for the rest of the turn. So, if you're planning on playing this package, and you do want to do things from the extra deck during your turn, I would use this card at the very end of the turn. You can still use it at the end of the turn, even though you have done things with the extra deck prior. So just keep that in mind. You want to activate this at the very end of your turn if you do have things to go into from the extra deck. And here's the combo. We activate Nadir Servant, sending a copy of Garura to our graveyard, and then searching a copy of Dogmatika Maximus from our deck to our hand. Next, we can banish that copy of Garura to special summon our Dogmatika Maximus. Dogmatika Maximus' effect can send 2 cards from our extra deck to our graveyard. In this case, we're going to send the Titaniclad, and then anything else. Right now it's an Entis. It doesn't necessarily matter what it is, as long as we get the Titaniclad in the graveyard. We proceed to end phase, activate the Titaniclad effect in our graveyard to special summon a Dogmatika Ecclesia to our side of the field, activate Ecclesia's effect on summon to add to our hand a copy of Dogmatika Fleur-de-Lis for that non-targeting quick effect monster negate for our opponent's turn. A couple of stipulations with Fleur-de-Lis: there has to be an extra deck monster on the field for herself to special summon, and then quick effect, non-targeting, negate a monster effect on the field, as long as there's a Dogmatika monster on your side of the field other than Fleur-de-Lis, which is why we typically want to summon the two of them so we have a backup just in case one of them gets destroyed or what have you. That combo did not involve Dogmatika Punishment, and that's just because sometimes we don't have all of the options to go into every single thing. And with that in mind, let's do a combo where we can do everything, which will be a copy of Nadir Servant in our hand and a copy of Dogmatika Ecclesia in our hand. The beginning of the combo is exactly the same. We activate Nadir Servant, sending Garura, which lets us draw the card, by adding Maximus to our hand. We can special summon the Maximus by banishing the Garura and activating the Maximus effect, sending 2 more extra deck monsters to our feet from our extra deck to the graveyard. Next, we can normal summon our Ecclesia, or if we already have an extra deck monster on our side of the field, or if our opponent does, we can special summon Ecclesia, activate its effect to search a Dogmatika Punishment, and then set that Dogmatika Punishment, proceed to the end phase, activate Titaniclad's effect to add a copy of Fleur-de-Lis to our hand. And that is more or less the full combo of the Dogmatika line. With this, we do have that non-targeting monster negate quick effect, as well as that targeting monster destruction. One more thing to know about Dogmatika Punishment, like I said earlier, you're locked out of your extra deck for that turn and the turn following, but when you activate it, you have to send another monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, which is where all of these toolbox extra deck cards can come into play. So this engine really works well either going first or second, honestly. I would prefer having the Nadir and the Ecclesia if I was going first, that way I can set the punishment. But if I'm going second, you don't necessarily need to search the punishment because it is a trap card and it's slow, and so we can get the Fleur-de-Lis on our side, or in our hand, to do things, as well as just sending a smorgasbord, as I said earlier, of cards that will get effects to destroy things and so on. Bounce things, negate monster effects. There's so many different options. Here's the destroy things. There's so many different options that we can have from our extra deck, which really makes this engine shine. So let's talk about those extra deck monsters that we can send. We've talked in length about Titaniclad, so I think you kind of get the gist of them by now. It's definitely a want in your Dogmatika engine. However, it's not necessarily a need, and we'll go into that in just a second. So here I've got that handful of extra deck cards that we can send from our extra deck to our graveyard, and I went over earlier what they all can do. So let's talk about why I want to have one of every single kind, more or less, of all of these different types of extra deck monsters, and it's because of this card, Ultimate Slayer. Ultimate Slayer can send one extra deck monster from our extra deck to the graveyard, and then send one of our opponent's extra deck monsters from their field to their extra deck back, as long as it's matching the same type of extra deck monster as the one that we sent. So, for instance, this works really, really well against cards like Mirror Jade the Ice Blade Dragon. If we send a Garura to the graveyard, we can send their Mirror Jade back to their extra deck, and they don't get the effect of Mirror Jade to blow up our board in the end phase, because it's in the extra deck and it can't activate in there. And then the final awesome thing about Ultimate Slayer is that our opponent cannot respond to this card's effect with monster effects. So going back to that Mirror Jade example, they can't chain Mirror Jade to banish one of our things on one of our monsters on our field. So Ultimate Slayer is a really, really dang good card for consideration in the Dogmatika Engine / package, depending on how large you're deciding to make this package in your deck. Another great addition that you can include with the Dogmatika package is the Shaddoll package. Because of the Dogmatika card sending monsters from the extra deck to the graveyard, we can send a copy of Shaddoll Apkallone, which can then search a copy of Shaddoll Schism, which we can set to our side of the field, and on our opponent's turn, flip it face up to fuse for a copy of El Shaddoll Winda, which is a floodgate, but hey, it's still Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's not banned, so why not use it, right? Another really good option that this Dogmatika engine can fit into is the Fire King deck. During your Dogmatika stuff, you can send a copy of Tri-Brigade Shurig the Ominous Omen, which can then add to your hand a Wing Beast, or Beast Warrior, which a lot of the times will be legendary Fire King Ponix. Keep in mind, this is not exclusive to just the Fire King stuff. You can send that Tri-Brigade Shurig to search yourself a copy of DD Crow to have for your opponent's turn, which is another fantastic option. So this engine definitely works best in decks that don't necessarily need the extra deck, like a Ritual deck, for example, but they can still be used pretty well in decks that do need the extra deck. As long as we play Nadir Servant at the end of our turn, we should be okay, and Dogmatika Punishment is not necessarily a necessity for the deck or for the engine, so you don't necessarily need to be locked out of your extra deck by playing this engine as well. And with that, let's talk about all of the different variations that you can build this engine to make it fit your specific deck or what you want it to do or what you want to get out of it. As I stated at the start, the core of the Dogmatika engine is these 10 cards. However, if you don't want to play something like Dogmatika Punishment because you do want to stay with your extra deck, you don't necessarily need to run your Dogmatika Ecclesias because Ecclesia is the only way you're searching for that Dogmatika Punishment. Titaniclad can only search monsters, so Ecclesia is your only way to Punishment, and so if you're not playing Punishment, you don't necessarily need the Ecclesia. You just want to be sure you open that Nadir Servant in your opening hand. And that bumps us down to just 6 cards or 5 cards for your main deck and 1 card for your extra deck. And of course that combo is just as simple as it always has been. You search the Maximus, you special summon by banishing, and then you Maximus effect to send the Titaniclad, end phase Titaniclad effect to add the Fleur-de-Lis to your hand. You have the Maximus on board so you can activate the Fleur-de-Lis once it hits the field as well. And if you want to go even further and you want to test your luck, you don't even have to play the Titaniclad. You could in theory play 3 Nadir Servants, either the Maximus and the Fleur-de-Lis, and hope you just open your hand with 2 of them. 2 of any of those combinations would get you to that full combo because then you wouldn't have to search for the Fleur-de-Lis in the end. I don't necessarily recommend that one though. I think Titaniclad is very worthwhile if we're going to run this version of the package. And going the next step further, if you do plan to do that Fire King combo where you send the Tri-Brigade Shureg to search off the legendary Fire King Ponix, you don't even need to run the Titaniclad or the Fleur-de-Lis. All you need to do is the 3 copies of Nadir Servant and 1 copy of Maximus. You can activate the Nadir Servant, send an extra deck monster, whether it be the Shureg here or a Garura, special summon the Maximus by banishing, and there you go, you have it. You've got your Ponix in your hand, you've got your potential additional draw cards off of the Garura, or whatever extra deck thing you want to get done. And last but not least, maybe you are running the Tri-Brigade package in your Fire King deck, and you want to be dang sure you find that Ponix. You can always throw in an extra copy of Dogmatika Ecclesia as your quote-unquote 4th copy of Nadir Servant because it can search the Dogmatika Maximus. Just let it be known that you have to have a monster in your extra deck for that to work, and Nadir Servant is just so great by sending that monster for you. And that is more or less all of the different variations of the package. You have your typical large package with all of them, your much more condensed package, and so on. On top of all of this, I've also seen some people throw in things like Dogmatika Nexus, which isn't super consistent but can be very interesting. Essentially, you special summon this card by targeting 4 different extra deck monsters in both your graveyard and your opponent's graveyard, and special summoning the card and then banishing those cards. Then at the start of your battle step, if this card attacks a special summon monster, then you can blow up all of your opponent's attack position monsters on their side of the field as well. Pretty dang niche, but I thought I'd bring it up as well. There are also another handful of other Dogmatika cards that, if I'm being completely honest, I've never read once in my entire life. Don't necessarily fit super well with a small engine, let alone the Dogmatika deck as a whole. In fact, you don't even necessarily play Nexus in the Dogmatika deck, but I thought it was slightly viable, so I figured I'd talk about it here. And that is the gist of the Dogmatika engine. There's really not a lot left to say about it. But if you do have something to say, please let me know in the comments what you think of the engine, how you use the engine or have used the engine in your decks, and maybe even future engines you'd like to see me cover. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.